to make things hinge. We can open the door. We put a door on without any hinges. Can we get the door open? You all know how hinges work. T-hinge. I don't know. Do you want me to pass all this stuff around? Do y'all want to touch all this stuff or not? Okay, well, it's all here if y'all want to come touch it later. T-hinge, they're just variations on the theme. They all have a pin in them. They have two parts and they fold back and forth. The one big variation is that loose pin versus tight pin hinge. This is called a loose pin hinge. I can take the pin out so that I can attach it together. I can come in. How many of you have tried to move the refrigerator in the house and it won't fit through the door? You have to take the door off the hinges to get that extra 2 inches so that you can get the refrigerator. Okay, if you've never done that, I'm so happy for you. If you've ever done that, I'm so sorry for you. Anyway, most doors, if you go into pretty much any door, they have loose pin hinges. You can take the pins out. So you make hinges like these that where the pin is just riveted in there. It's put in there and it's hammered tight, and so it can't fall out. I went and bought hinges one time. They looked surprisingly like, and I thought I was buying tight pin hinges. And they looked like tight pin hinges. They had a little riveted in on both ends of it. And I started using them. And then the pin came out. So I was using them in a kind of, beyond their capacity. I was using them on an application that I needed a small hinge, but I was putting way too much force on it. And as it turned, the pin started working its way out. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong? And it was a fake pin. It was just pushed in from one end. It wasn't actually riveted on the other. It had a fake little button on the other end to make it look like it was a tight pin hinge. It wasn't actually a tight pin hinge. I'm not sure why they did that. I assume it was because it was cheaper to manufacture. Anyway, butt hinge, just based on, you can get hinges all the way from, little bitty tiny ones. I don't see, this is the smallest one I have. From little teeny tiny ones to put on your little jewelry box or whatever it is, all the way up to giant, huge ones to put the vault door on the vault. So, it just depends on your application. Senior backpack hinges. Look, this is all these other hinges. We just stole them. We didn't actually invent any of this stuff. This is the only hinge that one of the few pieces of things that the theater people have actually invented for themselves. Most technology that we use in theater, because we're a tiny industry in the grand scheme of things, we don't do our own R&D. We just steal technology from and inventions from other disciplines, if you will, other sources. But the cool thing about it, it's a loose pin hinge, so you can also buy these in tight pin variation. But it has a pin that has nice little L pins on it, has a nice little point on it, so that it makes it go together. And these are, you put them on 2 pieces of scenery, so you carry them out on stage, you put them together, you put the pin in, boom, you're done. I've seen entire sets put together with these things. Go.
I'm 90% certain we used a lot of those when we did play this wrong.
You did, or I did?
I did.
Okay. We did not.
Really?
Yeah.
No, we didn't use many of these.
We had.
I don't know if we used any of these in our show. There's a lot of loose pin hinges, but we didn't use any of these.
I think we used them because we had the back set. We just pulled them all at the same time, just pushed.
Got it.
Back to fall.
Ours had ropes. I made it way more complicated than it probably needed to be. You typically can't buy this at your local retailer. You typically have to buy it through a coffin lock. This is a cool invention that they used to lock coffins. How many people have ever locked or unlocked a coffin in a lifetime?
A cough?
I want to hear that story.
I work in a haunted house.
You got it. I had never really spent any time around coffins. If we did a show at graduate school where we went and got a coffin, there was a scene in the show where the performer was in the coffin. And so we had gone down to the mortuary, the funeral home they call it. And somebody made some phone calls, and I got in the truck with a guy and we went across town to this funeral home, and they had a coffin that had gotten damaged. And so they donated it to us. And I was very surprised at how the coffin was constructed and how the latches worked on it, everything else like that. It didn't have this on it. But, But they do have interesting locks on them to keep them closed, so they do actually lock shut so the corpse can't do it. Anyway. This has a coffin lock key. It's just a hex, 3/8 inch hex thing you put in there, and it has a cam in it that comes out, a little half circle, hemispherical is different than half circle. And so this piece is a receiver. You bolt this to one piece of scenery, this to the other piece of scenery, you bring them together, and you turn it, and it locks them together. So typically, the only thing you see from the outside is a hole that you stick this in, and then they unlock. It unlocks. If I can figure out which way to turn them. So, coffin lock. These things are really cool. You can just put them together really fast. The downside to them is that there is a maximum load limit. They're just stamped sheet metal, and so if you put enough load on them, they will pull apart and do terrible things. So, and they don't position very easily. Sometimes they're still loose. They can move around some. As with anything in life, handles. Look, we have handles. I just saw another one. There it is. A couple different sizes. How many people have put their hand on one of these in their lifetime? Yeah, okay. Screw them down the scenery, use them as handles. Barrel bolt. How many people have been in the shady dive bar and have to use one of these in the bathroom?
Yeah.
There you go. It's just a rod sliding back. What did you say? I thought it was very good stuff. Anyway, it just slides back and forth. We use these very much like to hold doors shut, to do all kinds of different things, to hold scenery together. One of the things, we use a different version of this to lock a piece of scenery into the floor. This is on the bolt this to the side of the wagon, roll it over to the hole in the floor, drop that down into the hole in the floor to keep the wagon from moving. Typically when we're doing that, we use a much larger version of this, and oftentimes we use a custom-made one that we call a cane bolt. Just another way to latch things together. Angle irons. This is one that we have about, I don't know, a couple hundred of these that we've made over the years. It's just a piece of angle iron that we've cut to length and drilled holes in so we can screw that together. Super handy for making connections. Screw this down to the floor, screw that into the leg of the platform to keep it from moving around. There's another angle iron, I saw it. I don't see it in this, oh here it is. This is a commercially available one. They come in all different sizes, all the way from teeny tiny with one screw hole in them, all the way up to 14, 15 inches long. Again, just for you screw one end down, screw a bolt one end down to one thing, screw a bolt the other one down to the other thing, just to hold things together. Angle iron. I don't remember. Barrel bolt. You don't need to write all this down. If you download the thing that's on the Canvas site, all this is in that piece of paper, that non-piece of paper that I used to pass out as a piece of paper. And if you look at the one that's on the Canvas site, you'll notice that I figured it out this morning. I was looking at it. Why is the formatting is off a little bit? Because the commas and the apostrophes and the quotation marks all are extended in that version, which made the whole document longer. It just threw off the formatting. It was weird. I don't know why that happened. Swivel casters and smart casters. What's the difference between these two casters? No, let me change. What's the similarities between these two casters?
Yeah, wheels.
This wheel is exactly the same as this wheel. I can take this bolt, the axle out, the bolt, and swap the wheels between these two carriages. That's what we call this frame that holds the wheel. This is a smart caster because it goes around in a circle. Okay, it swivels. This one doesn't. It just goes in a straight line. So I bolt this to a piece of scenery. It only goes that way. If I bolt this to a piece of scenery, it can go in all the different directions. Smart caster, dumb caster. There's another name. Smart caster, dumb caster. Oh, I got ahead of myself. They come in a wild variety of different styles. These are all plate mounting casters. You'll notice that there's one down here that has a stem on it. It's got a bolt sticking up. You put that through a hole, put a nut on it. If you look at the wheels on these chairs, they're stem mount casters. They go up in the tube, the same way with the ones on the tables. So I didn't bring one with me. some of them, like the lower right side over here, have a lock on them, or whatever. The ones on these tables have little locks on them. A dizzying array of options and sizes and all the things. It's just mind-boggling. If you start digging into it, you go to the caster manufacturer catalog, and it's just you call the caster company and say, hey, I need a caster, and they're like, they just laugh at you because there's so many variations. I have a really funny story about a stem caster that got lost in an elevator sometime. They don't turn, they don't swivel. Triple swivels, these are the cool ones. There's 3 caster wheels, these are little stem mount casters mounted to this plate, and it's all mounted on a plate, the whole thing swivels. And why is that? If I take it down as a regular old swivel caster, you've probably all experienced this at some point in your life, but I don't know I don't know, I've moved so much scenery. If I'm rolling my caster wheel along in a straight line and I need to go back the other way, it's going to start doing that, and eventually it's going to break. We call that braking whenever it starts swiveling. Because the axle, it always wants to follow. It doesn't want to lead. It's just the way physics works. So it'll eventually start breaking. The trick is that where the wheel is contacting the earth is right here, and the axis of the swivel is over here. Does that make sense? And so whenever, if this is where the wheel has to swivel around that point. So if you have a whole bunch of caster wheels on something, they don't all break at the same time. They all break differently. And so if they start breaking against each other, it's really hard to get the thing to change directions without an unbelievable amount of force. And so sometimes if you're pushing something that's on caster wheels, whenever you start pushing it, you want to push it just a little bit to the side so you can get all the wheels to break at the same time and in the same direction. Because if you just push it straight, they'll sometimes break into each other. Maybe I can demonstrate a little bit. If I'm pushing these 2 wheels this way and they start breaking towards each other, then I have to overcome that friction because they're literally stopping themselves. It's pretty amazing. I remember the first time I really figured out what was happening. We had a cart that had a whole bunch of weight on it. It had these really soft, very grippy tires. And we were on an asphalt driveway. And we started pushing the cart, and the wheels went like that, and it literally stopped. There was 4 of us trying to push this thing, and we could not move it because the wheels had just turned like that, and so we just stuck there. I had to pull it back and then start over. So if you push them to the side a little bit, they'll all break together, but then the cart isn't going exactly in the same direction. You had to move it around, and so physics works against you. That was a long explanation to get to the why the zero throw is so cool, because as I'm rolling it along, notice all the wheels are following me, right? When I start going back the other way, notice how they all break differently, and this plate swivels a little bit. See how that works? So that's the beauty of the zero throw, is I can move exactly back and forth in the same direction, and it does all the braking and takes care of all that physics for me. These are really cool, they're really expensive. This is about a $300 item right here. So they get really stupidly expensive really quick. They're 600-pound capacity right there. So pretty cool device. And they get this one right here. Notice how it has a double wheel on. I think the load capacity for this wheel is like 1,800 pounds. It's really crazy. So really cool things. Typically, the only industry that uses these is the theater world. You don't find them in other industries. So they're not very. That's why they're so expensive too. Is because they're low production run. They're a specialty item. So you can make your own. I was working for an organization years ago, and we couldn't afford. We needed like 70 of these things for this huge show that we were doing. And so we went out and bought. I found a surplus supplier that just had the carriage, had a pretty heavy duty carriage, and we took a saw and we cut the bottom of it off. And I got a hold of a machine shop on the other side of town, and they made this plate for us, and we welded it on there. And then we bolted and bought little cheap casters and built them. So we built a huge number of them for very low cost. The list is really endless. Any questions about what we've gone through so far? I didn't expect that. I expected that.
I have a question, Curtis. How do you choose what caster to use?
Experience.
But it's not just that,
Right.
right?
Typically, I mean, it kind of does. It comes back to that. But you start with how much weight does it need to carry? How quiet do I need to be? There's a vast difference between these two wheels because this wheel is a hard rubber caster. It's rubber. Can you hear that? Now imagine 100 of those, all making that same sound. It gets pretty deafening. So this one, notice the difference because this is a softer rubber. So one of the things that you wind up that's great about this is a called a gray thermoplastic wheel. This is a pretty common wheel that you can find pretty much everywhere. I love this wheel because it's really quiet. This one's not that quiet. The smaller they get, the more the different the smaller they get, the higher the frequency, and the more they pierce through. The larger the wheel, the lower the frequency, so they don't make, even if they do make, the sound that they do make doesn't travel as far. Does that make sense? It travels at a lower frequency, so you can hear it. Where was I at? And you know, how tall does it need? One of the largest considerations that when I'm picking a caster and what I'm doing is how tall is it? Because usually I have a height problem. And so I'm trying to pick a wheel that's the shortest wheel that I can that will carry the load. This wheel, it says it's rated at 88 pounds, is what this wheel will carry. I don't know if this one says, it doesn't say. It says Darnell on the side. Darnell is a really good company. This one doesn't have a capacity on it. But I'm gonna guess that these are probably in the 400 or 500 pound range. They're really heavy duty. And so how much weight does it need to carry? How tall can it be, which dictates how big around it can be. All those kinds of factors is really what's.
How much noise can it make?
How much noise can it make?
How does it have to move?
Right.
Who's moving it?
Yes.
What's the repetition of the pattern it's moving in?
Yep.
Okay, so if that one moves, it can carry 400 to 500 pounds, then why don't you just use that one for all of them? Like, why do that?
Because this is a very tall caster. This is a 5-inch diameter wheel, 5 or 6, I don't know how big it is. I don't have to think. So it has a mounting height of that. If I need a platform that's only 3 inches tall, I can't put this under it. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So we do use these. We do use these a lot because we have so many of them. Someone bought these years and years ago, and that's one of the other beautiful things about caster is that they're capital investment. Once you buy them, you can't have them forever unless you destroy them for some reason. These are very expensive casters. I don't even want to guess what these would cost today. This caster right here would probably cost somewhere in the $50 to $80 range. So if you need, and so if I need 10 of them, or I need 50 of them. When I was working at Cincinnati Playhouse Park, we were doing a show, a little night music, Stephen Sondheim, a little night music. And it had a 40-foot diameter turntable ring. It was a ring. It was just a ring in the stage that had a platform in the center that was static and had this big ring that rotated around it, built into the floor. And so we needed something like 100 of these wheels to put on the floor to let this, mount the wheels on the floor, put the ring on top of it, and it's rolling around on the wheels. And so we bought wheels from this company out in Nebraska, and the reason we bought them was because they were cheap. They were like $6 a wheel, right? It was the loudest bloody thing you've ever heard in your life. It was so impossibly loud. We pretty much had, because we had gotten to where we had gotten to, we made a whole bunch of decisions to get there. And the reason we had picked those casters was because of their cost, because everything else in the show was so expensive. And so we weren't able to change them out. That's what ran the show. But there was music playing every time that thing moved because it was so loud. I mean, they cranked it up because that thing was so bleeding loud. So noise, weight, size, all the things.